So, as we all know, it is really challenging to launch new apps these days. The App Store is incredibly crowded, it is expensive, and it is time-consuming to find the right audience. Once you find that audience, it is imperative that you maximize the LTV for that app. What we found with our publishers really recently is that they're really doubling down on the existing titles that they have or franchises and trying to make those even last longer. And what I'm super excited about with our panel today is that we have such a wide variety of success in both owned IP, licensed IP, and giant franchises. But what's even more, I think, exciting about this group is that it's diverse, but it's also that they have titles that have lasted for years and years at the top of the charts. We're talking 3 and 4 years. So we're really excited for you to share all your secrets with us about how you've made apps that are built to last. So with that, if you guys could just take a little minute to introduce yourself. Oh, I didn't introduce myself. Besides, I'm Shannon Jessup, CRO of Tapjoy. I've been there for 8 years, and I love our crazy industry. So, Kenneth, tell us a bit about yourself.
Hi, I'm this is Now. Sorry about that. So I'm Kenneth. I'm from Hothead Games in Vancouver. So we are around 200 people, and we've been around for 11 years now. And we're focusing on starting with sports game, and now we have focusing on first-person shooting game. And our biggest title is so far is Killshot Bravo.
Hi. I'm Jeff Gurian, VP of Marketing and Ad Monetization for Kongregate. We've been around for a long time. Originally started out as a web gaming portal 10 years ago and moved into mobile publishing about 3 or 4 years ago. Now we're cross-platform publishing on mobile, web, Steam, console.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Keith Pichelman. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Concrete Software. We've been in this space making mobile games since 2003. So we actually celebrating our 14th year anniversary this month. Thank you. we started off, back in the day making games for the old Razor phones, flip phones, and over the years for BlackBerry, Windows Mobile, Palm, and today we're making games for iOS and Android. And I've also branched off a little bit, working with some AR, VR, and we're going to launch our first console game this fall.
Congratulations, that's exciting. Hi everyone, my name is Joy Taylor. I work for Electronic Arts. For those of you that don't know Electronic Arts, we are a multi-platform gaming developer and publisher. I work for the Global Brand Partnership Group, which is responsible for putting ads into our game environments across console, mobile, PC, and specifically my work is around the strategy and the operations and the research behind what we do.
All right, first question, we'll start with Jeff. What is your basic philosophy for long-term success of a winning title?
We have 2 rules of thumb nowadays, and getting these 2 rules have taken a lot of trial and error to get there. But basically, the 2 questions we ask at every game we look at is the game featureable, and is the game marketable? It can survive and thrive, actually, if it's just one of those 2, but if it's none, you kind of almost have to get lucky for the game to be a success. So those are our 2 benchmarks. We look at everything from the art style to the gameplay mechanics to see what the platforms would be interested in, and we use our extensive portfolio to benchmark those. And then the marketing side is obviously we need the LTVs to be at or above, ideally, the CPIs, and that's just a function of optimizing game mechanics and ads and IP through test markets.
I would say the most obvious answer, which I'm sure others would say here, is that it has to be fun. If the game isn't fun, people are not going to play, and there's a lot of competition out in the market, clearly, so that is critical. Beyond that, I would say for EA, we're very focused on making sure that our games migrate into becoming live services. So a game that has the ability to have additional content that is rich and relevant is going to be important. And the other thing that right now we're really focused on is how do we make our games more social, and how do we make it easier for you to connect with other people that you can either play against or play with.
I think live services are really important for us as well. When we release a new game, usually we have an idea of how we think the users are going to act and how they're going to interact with our games. So probably the most important thing to have a longevity in our games is to really understand our users and to really understand how they're playing our games and understand what they want from there. So we work really diligently to analyze how they're playing and where to go from there, and then keep making the games better over the years, and making sure that they still have content, and that we have live operations so that they always have content when they're playing like our PBA bowling game 4 years later.
I think those are all great answers. I would just say all of the above. But I guess for us, it's definitely replayability. So how would a user get bored after 7 days, 14 days, 30 days, 90 days? How do you keep your game fresh? So for us, it's definitely focusing on live ops. How do you put different style events based on the similar gameplay? So how many different variation can you do with the same type of gameplay? How do you make it different? So we're focusing on our core strength, which is like first-person shooting. How many different style can you, slay a zombie or like shoot the bad terrorist or something like that? So yeah, it's definitely, I think, you have to know what your strength is and try to build on that.
Got it. And then back to Joy and Jeff. You guys had mentioned before when we were talking about how ads play significant roles in your games and how that is important to the longevity and monetization of those games. Could you just touch on that for a sec?
Sure. Our philosophy, or what we're aspiring to do, is really think about ads more as a feature of the game experience and something that can actually add value to the player experience, whether it be helping them get through a pinch point in the game or helping them progress. But that for us is critical, so it's adding to the player experience.
Yeah, and for us, and this has taken a while to get into this mindset, but ads are a KPI, and we look at that KPI just as closely as we do retention and monetization of IAP. Some of our games, like Adventure Capitalist, a game we published with Hyper Hippo, that game, the bulk of the revenue counts for ads. We could not do UA without the ad revenue that game generates. The ARPDAU on ads is very good. And so sometimes ads can be as critical as an IEP, and they should be treated with the same level of scrutiny and diligence that you would optimize IEP or retention.
All right, next question. How do you see the difference between owned IP and licensed IP in the way that you monetize those? Joy, start with you.
I don't think we necessarily approach monetization differently, but clearly margins are very different on owned versus licensed IP. A licensed IP brings its own benefits because you've got a built-in brand that you can leverage, and oftentimes that partner will help you promote it, which is great, but it's something that you also have to weigh with the reality of something that's owned and operated is going to give you better margins. We also have experienced that oftentimes a licensed IP also is something that is easier for us to get featured as well.
Yeah, I think, when we work with different IPs, different brands, we try to find different ways to highlight those in our games. I think about like Rapala Fishing, the game is kind of set around tournaments. In the game, you tend to win more virtual currency. And so players kind of have this cycle of going in more tournaments, winning more virtual currency, entering again and again. Working with Rapala, they come in with real prizes. And so that IP comes in with something a little more significant, and that ends up driving a lot higher retention. So more ad views, people tend to spend more because they want to play more often for these tournaments that have real prizes. So I think we try to figure out ways that we can kind of work with our partners, these different brands, to try to monetize, maybe not necessarily differently, but maybe hopefully a little better.
So we did IP before with NHL and MLB. What we learned from that experience was that the IP itself doesn't necessarily guarantee a top grossing game. What it does is, like Joy mentioned, it creates brand awareness. So people was like, hey, I'm looking for the specific NHL players. But we also find it interesting that people love creating their own players, creating interesting name in the team. So I think you have to build the game model out. For us anyway, we tend to basically build a game out with a strong economy, with a strong retention and playability, and see if we can leverage a IP version of that. We don't shy away from IP, but we want to build our own brand as well for multiple reasons.
I mean, I think to Joy's point, the economics are completely different when you're giving money to both the platforms and then the IP holders. So you have to model that into how much money you think you can make. Another key element is the headaches you have to deal with. If you own the IP, you have complete freedom and to do what you want with that IP and set its own rules. When you're working with a third party, that IP holder gets to dictate the rules. And that can come with a lot of headaches. There's a lot of nuance to brands and a lot of pickiness that you can't explain away. You can't not get away with doing. They can block your game for it. So, going into if you are considering IP and talking to third parties, getting a sense of how hands-on they will be, what needs to get approved, the creative review process, that's all things that need to be taken into consideration because you could end up spending a lot more time working on little things in the game than the game itself.
So perfect segue to the next question, which Keith, obviously PBA bowling, 4 years of wild top-of-the-charts success. So you've had so much success with that, NHL hockey, fishing, you just referenced. Can you talk a bit about how you've tapped into those great brands and how you work with them? Because I think that the way that you partner with them and work so closely with them is something that's really different than other things out there.
Yeah, absolutely. That's actually really core to our business. Is you can see our top 4 games are branded games, and brands that we went out and found, and we worked with them and realized that, this is going to be a good fit for us. PBA is a perfect example where they have a pretty good sized broad user base, and they're a good size that they really wanted to work with us. When we work with them, we work with the commissioner down. We go to live events. They have us on TV on Sundays. We have our own sponsored event and things like that. So they really try to bring their user base into the game, and they see it as a retention and a way to get younger kids into playing the PBA or like watching the PBA, getting to know the professionals. And then I think it's even maybe more unique with the PBA, then they actually went out to their brands that they worked with. So like, you think about bowling, I mean, they have all like the bowling ball brands, the shoes and things like that. They worked with the Brunswicks, the DV8s, and they actually brought their users in as well. So we put in like the real content, the bowling balls, and in exchange you have the DV8s and all these maybe not huge pieces of these other companies, but pushing more users in. And so we've really been able to work closely with partners like the PBA to bring all these PBA bowling fans into the game. And it's kind of funny because it almost actually goes the other way as well, where you have people playing the PBA who become fans and they start to know the players. And we've heard that from players we've actually even talked to at these events where they're like, my God, people actually, coming up to me going, I beat you.
I beat you. So Joy and Keith, I know that you guys have had somewhat opposite experience in terms of control and not being able to do much of anything. So can you talk a bit about that?
Yeah, I mean, we definitely have to swim in certain lanes for sure, which we've gotten to know. I mean, our top games are right now, I think, are going to be Star Wars Galaxy of Heroes, FIFA Mobile, Madden Mobile, SimCity. SimCity is one that we have a lot more flexibility with. And I think what we've tried to do is rather than getting too fixated on what we can't do, we really try to lean into what we can. So in the case of Madden, for example, we're able to do live events and do things that are seasonally appropriate around the actual season of the sport. So for us, we want to, if you can't beat them, join them. So for us, we really are leveraging our licensed IP for the benefits of the content and seasonality that it can bring, which obviously helps us drive acquisition.
And I think getting that marketing direction from your IP holder up front is key. Knowing that they're invested in the game is paramount. If you're just one of 20 games that they're putting out this year, then they're just going to view you as another title, another minimum guarantee. If they're willing to put their skin in the game, put their marketing support behind that title, it's going to go a lot further. And making sure those rules are defined up front are often necessary, because you don't want to get too far down the road and find out they're only going to put out a Facebook post about your title, and that's it.
So Jeff, you touched on this a bit earlier, but to people out there who are considering investing in IP, what are the things that they should consider? What are the pitfalls, benefits? And Kenneth, you also talked about this a bit with NHL. So
yes, so I think for us anyway is that how do you utilize the brand? So I think we ought to see success story like Star Wars, Galaxy of Heroes. You see the Marvel Contest Champion. When you have people hunting for heroes or hunting for comic heroes, then there's a tie-in. People really want the Spider-Man. Another good example recently is one of our friends up in Vancouver, the Trailer Park Boys. So they utilize the IP super well with their idle clicker game, right? So it's the storyline, the plot, everything ties everything together. But we also see example where an IP where the gameplay doesn't really have a tie-in. For example, like a WWE match-3 game sometimes might not, it's harder for the user to gauge. It's not saying it's not going to be successful as well, but it's harder to leverage. So I think one of the things is knowing what your game is about and find the right IP is very important.
Yeah, an IP can be a blessing and a curse. It's good because it brings notoriety and it brings an audience, but the curse is that can also turn people off. Also, when you're dealing with IP and the title itself, there needs to be a genre kind of alignment as well. Obviously, story to the Trailer Park Boy example, story goes a long way. If you're dealing with PBA, you're automatically going to get people playing. If you like PBA, you like bowling. We have an IP game, Animation Throwdown. It's a collectible card game. It has Family Guy, American Dad, Bob's Burgers, those titles in it. Those are casual titles, and a collectible card game is a fairly hardcore mechanic. And so that mechanic kind of really shrinks the available audience from that IP. It's valuable, it's worthwhile, but it's not going to garner the full 60 million Family Guy people that watch the Family Guy every week, because it's a hardcore game that doesn't align with their interests.
Yeah, again, I think with IP, we just really look for a partner that's going to work really closely with us. Try to find someone that that really wants to get engaged and not just get an IP where we're just putting on the name of the game. We use it a lot for UA. We really want to find an IP that has an audience that is craving that brand and that IP. So we kind of evaluate on that, and then try to figure out how many users we can bring over from that brand.
Good. So. Speaking of Bob's Burgers, my entire family calls me Linda, by the way, so just for that reference. So, Jeff, Adventure Capitalist has been a crazy, wild success. It was obviously very popular on the web, but converting web to mobile, can be really, really challenging. Can you tell us about some of the challenges and how you guys were able to make that such a great success?
Sure. So Adventure Capitalist started out as kind of a side project by one of the developers at HyperRepo. They're based in Kelowna, Canada. It was built for web originally, and it didn't really have any monetization hooks. There were a couple things you can buy, and it did okay. And it got a bunch of users playing the game, built a name up for itself. It's really taken off when it's gone to mobile. When they went to mobile, they had a bigger focus on monetization, and they had a bigger focus on ads. And it's turned out the ads have really driven kind of the monetization for that title. Right now, the ads account for about 75% of revenue. So we wouldn't be able to do UA without ads. And that's making sure that it's an optimized ad placement. It's not just one ad unit, it's multiple placements. We monitor how many people are engaging with them. We monitor how many impressions we're doing. But that's really the big kind of differentiator between the web and mobile version of that title. We do see a lot of success with a lot of our titles cross-platform on web and mobile, but right now the ad inventory and ad demand and the ad CPMs on mobile kind of eclipse most other platforms.
75%, that's insane.
Yeah.
Wow, crazy.
People actually complain when the ads don't work, which is nice.
Okay, so perfect tie into my next question. So how have rewarded ads been received by your user base? So you said that your users complain when they don't have ads. That sounds very
I'd say the same thing. Rewarded ads have been fantastic. I always say now, I mean, we have customer support, people coming in, complaining that they don't have rewarded ads. We never have somebody come in and complain about not having interstitial ads. Rewarded ads have been even core to our games, I think, now, where they expect to see them, they enjoy them, and it's almost more engaging.
Yeah, I would agree. We had some skepticism within our studios as to whether or not player sentiment would be positive, and so we did quite a bit of A/B testing, user groups, etc., to really validate that it was in fact a really positive experience. And then just a real-world example for Real Racing 3. We had originally decided that we were only going to run rewarded ads for non-spenders, and then we were not going to show it to spenders because we didn't want to disrupt their experience. And we ended up seeing on the on various different boards on Facebook that people were complaining about the fact that they didn't get access to the reward, and their friend who hadn't paid did. So that triggered us to actually make reward-based ads available to all of our players, spenders or otherwise. And then the other thing I would just mention too, which was positive for players, but then ultimately a great thing for our business, is that we've also done a lot of testing that's shown that a user that actually engages with a rewarded ad is 35% more likely to actually make an in-game purchase. So it's actually also driving the other side of our business.
So just to tail on that, so those that saw a reward then were 35% more likely to make a purchase. Once you showed rewarded ads to those who hadn't seen it before but had made a purchase, did you see a decrease in in-app purchases?
No, it does not have an adverse effect on in-game purchases.
I think that's just a philosophy that is really hard to show unless you try it. But
and that was an important thing to make sure we clarified. And some of that is balancing the economy, making sure that you're not giving away things that are too valuable and so forth. But generally speaking, if the implementation is smart and right, then you can have both of those things coexist, and we haven't seen any deprecation.
Yeah, so I think we see the same thing as well. When we base a lot of things on analytics, and we definitely see that reward advertising leads to higher conversion, higher retention. It's quite natural. The way we see reward advertising is a bridge between the moment that person start up the game to the moment they're willing to pay their own money into your game. And you gotta give them a taste, essentially dangling a carrot. Another analogy I heard, I don't want to share, but you can. so give them a taste of the crack or something? So give them, get a good taste of the crack, and so get them hooked in. So it's kind of essentially, you want to show what your game is about, how deep it can be. So at the same time, I think one of the things that we found is the more integration, the deeper integration you have in the game, instead of just giving out currency, the higher engagement you see as well. And I think the user do engage and do know if you're doing anything, capping them or something like that. We get hate mail all the time saying, why are you capping me at 10 video a day? Or why are you capping me at 5 video per session? It's like, how do you figure all this thing out? My designer don't even know. So.
I agree with all that. I agree with what Joy said too. We've done the same analysis around retention and impact on IAP and have not seen any adverse numbers. One thing that keep in mind that we kind of have a rule of thumb with our ad placements is we never put an ad placement as a substitute for hard currency. You don't want that ad unit to be a gold farm, basically. And it actually devalues your currency because your first ad might be worth 2 cents a view, but your 10th ad might be worth 0.2 cents. So if you're encouraging people to continually watch ads, the value of subsequent ads continues to degrade. So you're actually devaluing your currency because those users are still earning that same currency reward. So we tie ads to boosts, multipliers, random gift drops, stuff like that, but never tie it into the game currency itself.
Got it. So Kenneth, Hothead has had tremendous success with your owned IP. Lots and lots of titles, Kill Shot, Rivals, Big Win, all of that. how have your monetization strategies evolved over the years, and how have they stayed the same?
I definitely think that we evolved over, my 6 years at Hothead anyway. So we used to be casual games, and even Big Win, it's addictive, but it's very casual. The economy is very simple. But once we get to like Killshot Bravo, it's very deep. There's a lot of, Killshot Bravo is our first game that have a better revenue runway on year 2 than year 1, which shows that the importance of live ops. And the way that we approach monetization is, you're not just getting money from one source. You're getting money from, microtransaction. That's important for us because we're mid-core games, but ads is also important in the sense that not only it builds a significant amount of revenue, it also ties positively to your microtransaction as well. So those goes hand in hand, and it goes back to, UX design, UI design, and everything else has to come early. You can't be like, one thing that I would say is, adding new design feature later once your game is live it's not as easy as it sounds. So think through early how you can use ads or how your economy works right off the bat.
I mean, kind of everything. It's kind of the big picture of everything that's been mentioned. Ads have kind of transformed how we look at games in general. Our run rate as a company on ads went from small 5 figures a month to now multiple millions per month. So that's kind of allowed us to take some games from barely marketable to marketable. But you have to look at the whole picture, like what's retention looking like, what's IEP looking like, how does ads, offer wall play into those mechanics with each other. How do the platforms going to view it? What's your LTV? How does that relate to your CPI? It's a lot of things to look at, and it sounds intimidating, but it should be. But kind of my point is, you don't want to settle on a core small set of metrics because you're going to lose out and miss out on some of the big important metrics that can help really drive value for your game.
Cool. So that ties in perfectly to the next question, which you just said there are a million metrics that you monitor, but what are the core ones that are most important to you?
So, most important to us really starts at LTV. We've worked really, really hard over the years to calculate our LTV, especially with ads, with advertising. It's somewhat simple to work with an attribution company to figure out your LTV for just in-app purchases. We have usually around maybe like 60 to 65% of our revenue from advertising as well. So it's very high in advertising, so it's really important for us to understand exactly what the lifetime value is of our users from channels that we acquire them from. So when we go out and we do user acquisition, we want to understand that if we're paying, $1, if we're paying $3 or whatever it is, we want to know that we're ROI positive. We certainly look at, underneath that, like pieces, we're always working at sort of the pieces that, make the LTV. So we watch retention really closely, ARPDAU and other numbers, but really at the end of the day for us, we really concentrate on the lifetime value.
Yeah, I would say the same thing. LTV is critical for us as well. I also would say that we obviously monitor DAU. It's a reflection of engagement and just the game sessions overall, closely monitored as we're trying to build out a live service business. The other thing on the flip side from an ad perspective that we also look at is the frequency of the ads that are running and where we have opportunities to adjust that to increase revenue but not impact engagement.
So for us, definitely from a business standpoint, LTV ARPU is definitely the key. When you look at it's like a pyramid. So up the top at LTV, so what drives the LTV essentially is like retention, conversion, remonetization. So those are key as well. And how do you and then you branch out to different metrics after that. From the ad side, I think, frequency is very important, like Joy mentioned. And then the other one, the big one for us is engagement. So essentially how many people engage with ads, that shows you if your placement is correct, if the reward you give out is appealing enough for the user. So if you have a high engagement, then, the frequency will come as well.
Okay, Joy, we talked about this quite a bit, and I think that you have a really good example, but how do you work within your organization to make sure that culturally the communication is good, the transparency is good, and that everyone collaborates and makes sure that you're all on the same page and everyone understands how advertising helps the game?
Yeah, that's it's a journey. It's been a journey. At EA, it's particularly tricky for us because we are a portfolio of games. We have ad technology and I think 27 different mobile games, which means we have almost 20 different studios that we're talking to and having to educate. So that is something that we've really tried to lean into data because that seems to be the common currency that everybody will really, or common language that everybody will really listen to. So for us, a lot of the testing is important. The other thing is we've also tried to partner closely with some key studios that we feel are really innovative and do understand the ad business and lean on them to educate other studios. So we've tried to leverage those folks and the data first and foremost as we are trying to navigate a huge host of different groups.
I think, Jeff, you had some good examples of people who you've worked with in the past who said, we're never going to put in ads, we're just going to only do IAP. And
yeah, I mean, we're in the same boat. We deal is working with independent developers. We deal with 30 some odd developers at any one time, and there was a lot of subjectivity around, I don't like ads, so I don't want them in my game. I don't need them if IAP works out the way they want. I said if you're in the top 50 grossing games, I'll turn off the ads myself. But until you get there, you might want to make some extra money, and ads can do that. So to Joy's point is basically, tracking everything, measuring everything, and then building case studies and data to show the next partner you're working with the success and impact it's had on the partners you worked with in the past.
Say for Concrete Software, it's all about communication inside the company. Since we don't work with other partnering companies, it's really about education and just making sure that the whole company is on the same page, whether it be quarterly meetings or just even stand-ups. It's just always trying to let people understand that if 65% of our revenue comes from advertising, that's how we're all getting paid our salaries. That's where the money comes from, and people understand that.
Cool. Very good.
So it's pretty much the same. I think the key point is communication. What's in it for them, right? It's like, so why should they do it? So I think it's like there's a lot of pulling teeth sometimes, but at the same time, if you show the value and do a lot of case study, and you rely on your partners, right? I always ask my partner for case studies so that I could send it to my designers, send it to my producer. Like, look at this. Like, it doesn't, just because you're doing well in microtransaction or IAP, doesn't mean that you could not make extra money from advertising as well. So I think that's a key. It's two type of audience we're dealing with. Even if your game have like 5% conversion, that's crazy number, and you still have 95% who won't give you a penny. Why not just make some money off them?
Makes sense. Okay, so moving on to UA, how has rewarded video changed things for you guys in terms of UA?
I think my UA manager will speak to that much better than I am, but they're all here, so hopefully I'm not gonna ruin this. They all said,
can come up here.
So they are saying definitely Vivo Video is our the go-to format right now. We definitely see a much higher ROAS in terms of return on advertising spend. The reason for that is our game is more mid-core, so we were able to demonstrate very cool bloody shot of people's heads getting blown off or zombies' head being blown off. So people like seeing things get blown off. Just that's my motto. So if you have any kind of game, just blow something up and people will enjoy and download and play the game. I think that's one of the things that we see. We have definitely believe that the next generation in terms of video or format of ads, that video is going to be a big part. It will be interesting to see if Playable will catch up to that, but that's kind of two of the newest thing on it's not new anymore, but it's most profitable for us.
Yeah, I mean, most of our user acquisition is on rewarded video, which those same placements run the playable ads, so we'll just call it the rewarded ad placements. Most of our UA is done through that. The second best, biggest channel probably behind that, Facebook. But even they're getting into, they obviously got into video, and they're getting into the playable ad format now as well. So for us, it's transformed the fact that we're able to go out and acquire users in targeted games that we know are interested in games, where actually the videos or the playables show them more of the gaming experience than you could ever get from an interstitial. And because it's user-initiated, the conversion rates are much better because the user is at a stopping point and not sat and watched the video for 15, 20 seconds. And then the other important thing, too, is making sure that we model that ad revenue back into our LTVs, so we're able to apply that to our CPI bids accurately and maximize the volume on our UA side.
Well, thank you, Kenneth. I guess we'll add the bomb ball to our next video for PBA bowling. I'll have to write that down. Yeah, for a long time we did almost all our UA with Facebook. It was kind of our mainstay, and really 2017 has been the first year that with the rewarded video, that we've been moving in and doing a lot more with that. We're finding early on some really good success, so very excited about it so far. And we're always trying to look for more channels as well. We feel like, on Facebook we sort of got all the users we could, so we're always looking for new channels. And it's nice to see out of the different places we've been testing so far, rewarded video has been the best.
So just touching on that again, you both mentioned playables, and have you seen performance better one over the other? Because we definitely hear mixed reviews.
So right now, I think it's very early in this particular format, and for those who have seen the playable ads, I think it's the experience might not translate completely, but there are company out there who's putting more effort into a better playable experience, and I think once we get there, where you can have a game that a 30-second where like a mini, essentially for us, it's like the kill shot, or it could be like the bowling, just bowling a run round, that would translate to the game experience. I think the people know what they're getting into, and that will translate to better conversion and overall out ROAS as well.
Yeah, we've seen better performance from playable. Some of that I attribute to what you mentioned around it does mirror the game experience. I have seen playables that don't mirror the game experience, and I would question how well they retain. I think it's also new, so that might be impacting some of the results on the high side. As it becomes more popular, it might even out with rewarded video, but I think that's to be seen.
Got it. Okay, so our last question, Joy would love to talk about brands in games and how that has been expanding over the years, and what the reception is, just video within those games, and how I think the acceptance of games is more widespread now than it used to be.
Yeah, I mean, I think we've been saying this for many years, those of you that have been in the industry, but I really think we've got to a tipping point where I think brands really do understand that gaming is content, and not to look at it any different than any other sort of content. I think they understand how immersive it is, and they understand now that performance is going to be higher because of the level of engagement. So we're doing less educating brands on gaming is big and more focused now on the power of the engagement and how they can utilize that to their benefit. So, at this point, I think you've got such a mixed bag of brands that are engaging, anything from a CPG brand in a casual game to, tech companies and beverage companies and in sports titles and so forth. So for us, the branded advertising market is growing exponentially, and I think they've also gotten past this idea that rewarded ads are incentivized ads. That was a challenge for us for quite some time, and that conversation, I think we've finally established that a rewarded ad is not an incentivized ad. It's just an ad that is adding value to the player.
I wish I had recorded that and we could just play it at the beginning of every one of our ad sales meetings to a brand. So true. All right, and my friend on the left is telling us that we are out of time. So I really, really appreciate everything. Thank you so much. Kenneth, Jeff, Keith, and Joy, and I really want to thank Tiffany Cantil for making us all look so good here. So thank you all for coming, and we'll be around to ask more questions. So thank you.